Hey, hello everybody. Good morning, and I hope you can all hear me. And if you can't hear me, please let me know. I see you all muted yourself, so if you want to talk, you have to unmute yourself. I'm not muted, I think, so you should be able to hear me. And it's been what 6 months since I used Zoom last in the spring, so maybe I'm a little bit. I have to get back into the habit of, and of course, since I opened up Zoom, back in the spring, more things have been added to it and to the program. Hopefully, they won't throw some surprises at us, at me, because of course my big fear is I'm going to push the wrong button and close down everything. And there it is, a little X in the right upper corner of my screen. That if I press it for some reason, that everything shuts down. So I don't want to do that. But okay, so we have a debate today, and we'll do that in the second half of our meeting today. And so I don't forget, let me go ahead and go um, to the attendance, and so I have to jump around here and see if I can find where I have opened up the attendance screen. So I have a camp up. So of course now I have to close the YouTube. So there, I closed the YouTube, and so we go back here to Cyber Campus and make sure that I share the Cyber Campus screen. And so I go press there and go share, and you should see there. You see the Cyber Campus screen for attendance, and your number is 308. 308 is your smart attendance number. So I go back to Zoom, and typically what I do when I go back to Zoom is I go, okay, stop share, 308, and then let me see, where's the chat? And then I open up the chat and I type in 308 that and send you the number 308. And so there you see, you should all have now the smart attendance number. And okay, so um, the first thing I wanted to do, of course, what I was showing you there. So of course now I go back to again. I have to avoid hitting the wrong button here. So I go back to let's see, the share screen and show you what I was showing you. And of course, it's not because I closed it. Yes, I closed the YouTube screen because it was going into some kind of advertisement function, which I didn't want to listen to. So I go to YouTube here and go back to what I was showing you, and I go back to history just to show you what I was showing you. Let's see, there you see, yeah, so that's what I was showing you here. So let me still go back to Zoom here and go to share screen, that, and go to share screen. And there you can see the Danish Prime Minister Frederiksen speaking at Copenhagen, which of course you know is the capital of Denmark. And of course, as we said earlier, Denmark is also, of course, holding the presidency of the Council of the European Union, or for short, the presidency of the Council of Ministers. And and therefore also when at least I think twice every 6 months during the rotating presidency, all of the heads of state and government come together and also meet in the so-called European Council. And sometimes they meet formally to come up with directions and guidance to the European Union institutions, since you've been reading about the European Union institutions. But of course, they also meet quote unquote informally, and that's to address. They can meet informally. The heads of government and presidents, the prime ministers and presidents come together and meet quote informally in order to address some policy issue, or but without formally invoking the direction of the European Union institutions, which is what they do when they meet formally, because they're supposed to set the agenda for the rest of the European Union, basically, when they meet formally as the European Council. So they've been meeting quote unquote informally in Copenhagen, and they also decided to bring together also a meeting of something called the European Political Community. And the European political community is something that President Emmanuel Macron of France started in 3 years ago in 2022 in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which includes the European Union member states and everybody else that would like to join the European Union if they're not in it already. And so when you add the 27 member states plus 13 other countries like Albania, North Macedonia, Turkey, Norway, which is not in the European Union, and Switzerland, and so on. You get 40 countries, and that's called the European political community. And basically, it's a way by which, again, to try to mobilize resources to deal with Russia, to contain Russia, to incentivize Russia. So they're all there at Copenhagen at this meeting, at this meeting of the European, informal meeting of the European Council and a meeting of the European political community. And so that's why it's called EU Summit in Copenhagen. And just to show you how this functions, of course, you can see here sitting next to the Prime Minister, if I can find it there, you can see there's Antonio Costa. He's the president of the European Council, which is maybe an unfortunate name because he's basically like the head secretary, the general secretary of the European Council. His job is to help the European Council, when it does meet, to organize their meetings, to get everything set up so that basically the final decisions that are necessary by the heads of government and state when they meet as the European Council is set up. And but he's got this impressive title, President of the European Council, but he doesn't really have um, um, power, right? His job is to facilitate communications. It's like he, for example, the General Secretary of the United Nations is Antonio Guterres, the former Prime Minister of Portugal. He's called the General Secretary of the United Nations. He's more like the General Secretary. This guy, Antonio Costa, is more like the General Secretary of the European Council. His job is to help them make decisions. So he's trusted. He's supposed to be able to, you're supposed to be able to share private confidential information with him and trust him to use it well. So typically you see these people who occupy this position of president of the European Council as somebody who typically does not come from a big, powerful country in the European Union. Again, I think he's only the fourth president of the European Council since the Lisbon Treaty was adopted in 2009, and which created the position of president of the European Council. And typically these people occupy these positions. They tend to come from smaller or less powerful countries, or countries that are not seen as favoring or biased towards any one of the major powers in the European Union. So the first president of the European Council was Herman van Rompuy, and Herman van Rompuy was a former prime minister of Belgium. And he was chosen partly because he wasn't a threat to anybody, and he was trusted by the British, by the French, by the Germans. There was no reason for anybody to be suspicious that he was going to somehow favor or be biased in favor of anybody else. And then he was followed by Donald Tusk. Donald Tusk, of course, had been prime minister of Poland, but at the time, this is before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Poland was a former communist country. It was a big country, 38 million people. I mean, compared to Belgium, which is not even half that population, right? But it was a country that was not seen as pro-French or pro-English, British or pro-German or anybody like that. And then he was replaced by another, I think it was Charles Michel, another prime minister of Belgium. And Antonio Costa, he's a former prime minister of Portugal, another small country, right? Small, far away. And so, because his job is to facilitate communication, and just to show you, but of course, it has emerged over the years that the primary unofficially, the top person representing the European Union is the president of the European Commission, which is Ursula von der Leyen. And of course, she always attends European Council meetings as well, even though she's not a head of government or state. She's the but she is the president of the European Council. So I'm sorry, president of the European Commission. So she's always at these meetings as well. So just to show you how this process is working here in right now going on in Copenhagen during this crisis. I don't see the High Representative for the Common Foreign Security Policy in this video. That's Kaja Kallas, a former Prime Minister of Estonia. She is not here. I don't think she's here anywhere. I don't see her anywhere on this video, but she's Kaja Kallas, the former Prime Minister of Estonia. And okay, so and of course, Estonia is really urgently concerned about what Russia might do to Estonia. We talked about that in the previous class. So okay, so it's been a while since I use Zoom, so I can't see you because you didn't turn on your cameras. I asked for your cameras to be put on, but you turned them off, so I can't see anybody. So it's kind of unusual to speak without being able to see who I'm talking to. But I assume you're there. So let me go back then to stop the share and then go open up I opened up my files here. So we go here to yes, so we go here to my lesson plan. And since I always want you to see what I'm doing, let me always go back to do the share. And so you can see what I'm looking at. And so I go share here, and of course you can see this is my lesson plan for today. And you can see we have a debate later on with Luis, and so you can see here um, what I wanted to highlight. I think, of course, I get ideas when I talk to you, and I want to act on those ideas. So I have here. Let me see if I can open up the. Oh, you see, I have to be careful because I closed the YouTube. So let me go back to opening up the YouTube, and again, so there it is. Of course, then I go back to Zoom, and then I go back to share. Oh, there it is. Okay, there. You go back to share. So here's Herman van Rompuy in action. If I can show it to you without clicking on the wrong button here, and Herman van Rompuy and Farage. So we go here, and you can see this big bad guy, Nigel Farage, mocking Herman van Rompuy. This is 15 years ago. You can see 15 years ago when the Treaty of Lisbon had come into effect in December 2009, so early 2010, and they appoint Herman van Rompuy. You can see him here. He's a former Prime Minister of Belgium, who was appointed the first president of the European Council. And of course, that means that Herman van Rompuy is very used to speaking in multiple languages. He's got to be basically multilingual. I mean really multilingual, right? If you're Prime Minister of Belgium, you've got to speak French, a native equivalency. You've got to speak Dutch native equivalency, and he speaks English as good as I do, and he probably speaks German as well as I do. And of course, that's considered to be a benefit for being appointed as president of the European Council because you are used to speaking in multiple languages and dealing with national sensitivity. So I didn't. Let me see what this one is. If I go, so of course some of these videos you can see this is posted by the Brexit Party. So this is Nigel Farage's party. So there you can see Guy. Sorry, you can see there. Where did he go? I just wanted to show you Guy Verhofstadt. Of course, Guy Verhofstadt is where did he go? There he is. There's Guy Verhofstadt. He's another former prime minister of Belgium. So of course, Belgians have they're the Brussels is in Belgium, of course. Belgians, of course, have again a strong interest in the European Union for a lot of different reasons, and also because they are again not a nation state, but they are also very much concerned because of their history about how they've been a focus of war fighting, at least in terms of battlefield area. Well, that's more, of course, elsewhere. But of course, I mean, he's always a permanent member, basically, in the European Parliament. So, of course, this is taking place in the European Parliament. Um, you can see there's this, of course, if I can find the person, there's the president of the European Parliament. So there's another president of the European of the in the European Union. It's the president of the European Parliament. And at this time was Jerzy Buzek, who was Polish, and of course his English is great, so he's speaking in English. But of course, all these people are being translated into their into their native languages. So, and of course, 6.5 years later, after Nigel Farage gave this speech, the British would have a vote on whether or not to a referendum on whether or not to vote to whether or not to leave the European Union. And to most people's surprise, including Nigel Farage's surprise, it passed. It passed, and he was surprised that the British people voted to leave the European Union. But they wouldn't do that again for another 4.5 years until officially at the end of January 2020, on the eve of the COVID-19 pandemic, which then shut down everything for a while. But um, and of course, but here's another response from Herman van Rompuy, which since we're highlighting Herman van Rompuy, Herman van Rompuy replies to Farage with contempt. Uh, I think that's the name of the video I have in mind. Hopefully, it comes up here. So, um, and maybe I won't be able to find it here. Replies to Farage, because of course this is all happening in the midst of the of the of the of the of the sovereign debt crisis. And you saw Nigel Farage claim that was uh, was reduced to a protectorate because, of course, the European Union and the International Monetary Fund were instituting loans to, and Germany and other countries were instituting loans to the Greeks to keep them from defaulting, and requiring that Greece make many changes in their economy and their economic system in return for that. But of course, I can't find it right now. But Herman van Rompuy replies to Farage, and of course, it's not coming up the way I had hoped, in which Herman van Rompuy replies to Farage, and but maybe I'll show it some other time, where basically Herman van Rompuy responds in French. So if I can find it here, I don't think he chooses to reply in French language, but it's not coming up. I thought it might come up because I remember watching it all the time, of course, where Herman van Rompuy replies in French to Nigel Farage, and I just don't. Let me see if I can find. I thought it would come up because, of course, I think I remember the title, but it's not coming up here. But and he says, he applauds the European Union in its in responding to the sovereign debt crisis, because the Europeans continue to cooperate with each other in rather than compete by devaluating their currencies in order to get their currencies cheaper, so that they can reduce the prices of their exports to get an economic advantage. He highlights that we are not doing that. We have not done that during the sovereign debt crisis, the greatest economic crisis the world had faced since the Great Depression. And I just mentioned that because Herman van Rompuy replies in French at the European Parliament, not in English, but in French language. And but of course, just to show you, of course, now Nigel Farage, by the way, of course, is now according to public opinion polls, he is number one in Britain. And if their election was held today in Britain, his party, which is now called the Reform Party, it's no longer called the Brexit Party, it would win, and he might become Prime Minister of United Kingdom. Now, of course, the British government doesn't have to have an election for a few years now, not until 2029. But he is the most, according to public opinion polls in Britain, Nigel Farage is the most popular politician in Britain. And finally, after several attempts, he won an election to the British House of Commons in July last year, so 14 months ago. After 7 or 8 attempts and failing to win election to the House of Commons in the British Parliament, finally in July, he finally won, and his party did remarkably well. I think it won 5 seats in the House of Commons, his Reform Party, and he's the leader. So we'll see if he has a continued future in Britain. But it highlights, of course, how he built his political career in the European Parliament, attacking the European Parliament and the European Union. That's how Nigel Farage built his political career. And even though he repeatedly tried to win elections to the House of Commons in Britain and failed repeatedly until July last year, right? So kind of ironic, I guess. But so just to show you, the institutions at work in the European Union. Let me see. Okay, let's go back now to stop share. That's right. I have to do a lot of stop shares so I can go back to what I'm showing you here. And what's this? Europe moves into the big lead. So let me see what I have open up here. That's not really okay. So and of course, we're overlapping a lot of topics here because some topics are covering policies and institutions, and we're going to talk about institutions and policies all the time. So here you can see a statement here about how Europe moves into the big leagues with the next generation European Union. So of course, this was adopted again during the pandemic. So over 4 years ago was it says here, you can see little more than a year ago, the European Union was nothing more than a bit part player in the global capital markets. The 2 or 3 bond deals that it would typically bring to market in a normal year were often small and would pass by with scant attention from the markets. But then it took its first big step into the big league with the launch of the 90 billion SURE program in October last year, again, during the pandemic. This is October 2020. But this week, the EU changed gear entirely with the launch of Next Generation European Union, which will see the European Union raise more than 800 billion euros over 5 years, transforming it into one of the world's biggest bond issuers. And everything changed in last April in 2020, so at the beginning of the pandemic, at a summit to put together a pandemic stimulus plan when the people in the funding team were asked how they might expand the program. They thought at a push they might raise a maximum of 80 billion euros a year in the markets. But when the summit ended, so a summit, of course, means the heads of government and states. So that's a meeting of the European Council. Summit is like the summit of a mountain. So the top level people, right, the prime ministers and presidents, they were told they would need to raise double that. We were crossing the Rubicon, said one official. What we were doing previously was very plain vanilla stuff. Suddenly it was a very different ball game. And it was just a question of throwing overboard everything that we've done before and starting to say, okay, if we're going to do this, this is completely different. How do we build it? How do we build a machine that's going to do it? So this was a big step, right? And it was a big step for the institutions because, again, the institutions are developing in response to these crisis responses. So again, now we've seen since the European Central Bank emerged like 25 years ago, the European Central Bank is a relatively young European Union institution. But with this next generation European Union program, the European Central Bank has played a critical role because of the financial aspects. So suddenly the European Central Bank is one of the major institutions of the European Union, along with the European Commission, the European Parliament, the European Council, the Council of the European Union. You have the European Central Bank set up. And of course, let's see, that is almost 2 years right before a little less than 2 years before the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, right? So that's about well, just 16 months before Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022, which would then be the next big crisis after the pandemic and after the sovereign debt crisis of 2010. The European Union has been developing its institutions in response to these crises. And of course, this was a big event. And again, I mentioned to you how it was always known before the pandemic how the Germans didn't really want to issue euro bonds on a regular large scale. It says here, so just to show you again how these institutions are developing. The team spent the first few months figuring out what resources it would need and bringing the right people to build a new, bigger funding body. It seconded individuals from the bloc's other big funding vehicle, the European Stability Mechanism. Now, the European Stability Mechanism, again, was an institution set up to respond to the sovereign debt crisis of 2010. It's sort of like a European International Monetary Fund. Again, another institution that was set up in response to a crisis, the sovereign debt crisis that was going on in 2010. All right. So they have there's people that work in the European Stability Mechanism. They have experience working with financial markets and monitoring financial markets. So they brought over these people to set up the Debt Management Office. The Debt Management Office is going to process and sell these euro bonds to fund the next generation European Union. Right. So let's look up European Stability Mechanism here. So if I go to Wikipedia. Let's see if I can do this here. So I go to, just to show you what the European Stability Mechanism is. So I go here like this, .org, like that. I stop share. Okay, let's see, stop share, go here, so I can share the right thing for you. Go here, European Stability Mechanism. Yeah, Wikipedia's got lots of nice European Union things in it because, of course, the European Union knows that so many people, yeah, European Stability Mechanism, you go here, click here. I think you can see the European Stability Mechanism, and there you can see, yeah, the European Stability Mechanism, which this was set up in response to the sovereign debt crisis that focused on Greece, but not only on Greece, also on Spain and Portugal, but Greece was the big epicenter, right, of this crisis. Ireland as well, but mostly Greece, right? And it was set up in 2012, right? And of course, not all the countries agreed to it. Like the Czech Republic didn't agree to it, and well, I mean, the Czechs did finally. I'm sorry, the Czechs did, but the British never did. But the British, of course, left the European Union a few years later. So the British never agreed to it. So they went around Britain and set up the European Stability Mechanism. So you can see, to go back to it's basically a way by which to give loans to set up the institutions to deal with sovereign debt crises, future debt crises that the European Union member states have. But of course, it's all kind of technocratic and separate. But going back to that article I was showing you, so to stop share, going back to is that what it was? Yeah, I think that's it, right? So it's share. Yeah. So they brought over those people, and of course, focusing on Greece, Ireland, Portugal, Cyprus, also Cyprus and Spain, who had experience of big bond programs. So, given that the team was essentially building a debt management office with the European Commission, which borrows on behalf of the European Union, it was natural for it to turn to the national debt management offices in terms of how to do this. So they went to the member states and brought in people from the member states of the European Union to set up a European debt management office. And so, and of course, doing all of that was experience in terms of dealing with the debt crisis. To manage that, they then used that to set up the Next Generation European Union program, and it goes on. Just to show again this, and it says here, just to show you here also, indeed, the creation of an auction facility has been the single biggest piece of work for the team. While auctions are a cheaper way to sell debt than bank syndication, they require more setup work to save time and avoid lengthy private procurement processes to turn. The team has instead sought help from the public sector institutions such as the European Central Bank, right? And again, I mean, just to go back to what I was mentioning to you before, until the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the German government, for example, they're always the ones nervous about these new financial programs and instruments being set up because they think that basically Germany is ultimately going to have to be the guarantor to make sure it works. And if there's a crisis, Germany will be the country to which the rest of the European Union looks to provide the loan guarantees and the loans like they did mainly to back up Greece when they loaned 300 billion euros to Greece, little Greece, country 10 million people. And most of that backing came from Germany because Germany's got the biggest, strongest economy in the European Union. That the Germans basically are nervous about these programs. And Angela Merkel, who was the prime minister, the chancellor of Germany, insisted, no, this next generation European Union program is a one-time affair. We're not going to get into the practice of issuing euro bonds. We're not going to keep doing that. It's not going to become, and of course, it has become regular since the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And as that war has continued now for 3.5 years, now the Europeans are continuing to issue new bonds, auctioning new bonds on financial markets to borrow in order to fund their Rearm Europe initiative. And that's typically what happens in terms of how these processes work. It's very incrementalist process that works, building upon what already exists to use what you have to respond to the next crisis because, it's a crisis. We need to deal with it now. How can we deal with it now? We use what we have now and we adapt it to respond now to the crisis now so we can deal with the next crisis, with the next problem. And of course, that's the politically feasible way to respond to these crises, rather than try to create something new out of the blue sky, right? Out of the thin air. So, and of course, it goes on here. Yeah, transformation EU as an issuer, plan issued, and of course now you can see the big boost here in terms of selling euro bonds, and then 2021 you see this big boost. Just over 720 billion of the money raised over the next 5 years will fund the European Union's post-pandemic recovery and resilience facility. Of that, around 55% will take the form of loans to be paid back by the member states. The rest, as well as another 80 billion via other programs, will be grants to be paid back by the European Commission through budget increases and new carbon and digital taxes. Once the auction is up and running in September of 2021, the team will, on top of managing monthly issuance, turn to the final pieces needed to make the Commission a fully operational debt management operation. Swap facilities will be added to allow it to fix the rate at which it lends on money to member states. Futures contracts will follow to help liquidity. For now, there seems to be no shortage of demands for bonds. The first Sure deal attracted more than 233 billion of euros of orders for the 17 billion of bonds on sale. Central banks, including the European Central Bank, continue to hoover up bonds to support the economy. Indeed, about a fifth of Sure bonds went to such institutions, but fund managers and banks were even bigger buyers. So this is from what was this from? This is from a business journal, right? Reporting on this. So just to show you how this process works. And of course, so I mean, just to show you, of course, how this works from the perspective of the member states. If I go back to some things I wanted to show you, so I stop share, and then I go back to the share screen, and we go here to here, and I open this up again, and just to show you. Yeah, so let's see if I can do this here. Click on this link. Why do I have this link here? So just to show you, let's see if it works. Yeah, this is from, what's this? Oh yeah, this is, okay, yeah, highlighting how the international business community is responding to Bulgaria going to join the Eurozone. So Bulgaria is supposed to join the Eurozone in a few months on January 1. and highlighting how this is making Bulgaria a really attractive place for investment, partly because of this belief that the Eurozone is for real, the Eurozone is effective, the Eurozone will always continue to exist, and that big challenge to the belief in the functioning of the Eurozone that it was real was the European financial debt sovereign debt crisis 15 years ago in 2010, when in response to Greece being in the Eurozone and then realizing that its budget numbers and its statistics were false, and that it was grossly overspending and overspending and its statistics about the value of the size of its financial deficit of its spending in 2010 was grossly underreported, and then bondholders, bond buyers were not willing to buy more Greek debt, right? And that caused a crisis, which led to that the fact that Greece was not going to be able to sell bonds to fund its own government deficits. And that means it would default on what it already had as an obligation to pay back from all the other bonds it had already bought under false data, false fake data about how bad its economic conditions were. That's when the European Central Bank and the rest of the European Union and also the International Monetary Fund, and that means the United States. The United States stepped in as well, and Barack Obama was president at that time to make sure that Greece did not default. And that's when the European Central Bank president, Mario Draghi, that Italian former prime minister, well, he then became, well, he was an Italian, right, who was the president of the European Central Bank. I think he was the second president of the European Central Bank. He announced that the European Central Bank would do whatever it takes to make sure that Greece was be able to sell its government bonds on financial markets in order to raise funds to be able to cover its budget deficits and pay its bills. You understand? And that announcement that the European Central Bank would itself, if necessary, it would print euros to buy Greek debt bonds, Greek government debt bonds, if necessary, so that Greece would be able to raise the money, to get the money it needs to pay back its old bonds and continue to fund the government. That meant that the European Union was committed, and the European Eurozone was a solid, real, secure actor that you could invest in as an investor. You could buy Greek bonds, you could buy Bulgarian bonds, you can buy Romania. Well, Romania is not going to be in the Eurozone yet, but you can buy Italian bonds. And the European Union has convinced everybody in the form of the European Central Bank and the European Commission that if you buy Euro bonds, it's a safe investment and you will be paid back. And why? Because they demonstrated that commitment 15 years ago, and even Greece now is able to continue to sell bonds to fund its government deficit because everybody believes so far that the European Central Bank, the European Commission, and the European Union more generally are committed to making the euro a continuous, functioning, secure financial institutional reality for you, me, and the entire world. So if you're a South Korean investor or a Chinese investor, you can buy Euro bonds and you expect that you're confident that that will be paid back with the interest promised by the timeline, the time deadlines promised, right? So, and now, of course, they're building upon that confidence to sell more Euro bonds, this time to pay for the rearmament of Europe, to deal with the Russia challenge, the Russia threat, and also to deal with the American problems of Donald Trump being reelected and he not being so willing to support Europe and Ukraine against Russia. So and so you can see this report about how, yes, you should consider investing in Bulgaria because, of course, it's going to join the Eurozone. And that means, for example, Bulgarian government, its interest rates it has to promise to sell its own government debt bonds has gone down. has decreased because it's a secure investment in the eyes of you and me and all other investors. And this is one of many types of financial reporting on the internet, calling attention that you should invest in Bulgaria because it's a safe, secure place. They're in the European Union Schengen area, which is it says here, the Schengen accession in March of last year means that you can go Bulgaria if you're in Bulgaria. Once you enter Bulgaria, you can go anywhere else, at least in theory, in the European Union, without having to get a visa, right? So if you're in Bulgaria, once you enter Bulgaria and in the European Union, you can go to France, you can go to Belgium, and you don't need to ask the Belgian government or the French government for a visa to be allowed to go into that country because you're already in Bulgaria. So that's the Schengen area. You don't need a visa. You don't need a special visa. You can go anywhere, at least in theory, all the time, like you're in France. You can go anywhere in France if you're French. If you're in France, you can go anywhere. So supposedly, and if you're in the Schengen area, you can go anywhere without requesting or having to get a permission, a permission. Right. So yeah, and now it's going to join. Of course, it's also encouraging investment, and it's joining the eurozone. And so you should invest in. Of course, keep in mind that this confidence is fundamentally rooted or founded in a number of different factors. But one critical factor is the commitment of Germany to make this work. Germany is one of the economic foundations of the European Union. It might be the European Union foundation. It's at least between a quarter and a third of the European Union's gross domestic product is just Germany. Is just Germany. And the German commitment to make this work is fundamentally important. And that's not been challenged so far, although maybe it might be challenged if the Alternative for Deutschland party, the AfD, the far right party, enters into government. But it's not in government. It's the second biggest party, I think, or second most popular party, maybe the second biggest party in the European Bundestag. Let's do something interesting here. Let's go to Gemini here. So we go to my Google account and we go to Google Gemini, and again, stop share and go to share and go to, I have to ask this question because I keep coming back to it. How uh, how many seats in the Bundestag does the Alternative for Germany party have? And it says here that the 151. So it's the largest opposition party in the 21st Bundestag, which was elected, a few months ago, this year, out of 630. So it's not in the government, but it's the largest opposition party. So in the government is who is in the government then? What parties form the ruling coalition in the Bundestag today? And it says it's the Social Democratic Party, the Christian Democratic Party, and I think that might be it. Yeah, okay. Those two parties, which the Christian Social Union, that's the party, that's Bavaria's version of the Christian Democratic Union, and the Social Democratic Party formed this grand coalition. But according to polling, public opinion polls, the Alternative for Germany party, it's the second most popular party in Germany. So would they undermine? I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that even Marine Le Pen, for example, in the Rally for France, for the Rally Party in France, if she were to become president or Bardella were to become president in the next elections in France, they're not going to take France out of the Eurozone or out of the European Union. And neither, I think, and therefore, it's hard for me to believe that Alternative for Germany would take Germany out of the European Union or the Eurozone. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen, right? So what else did I highlight here? So we're focusing on the institutions here, and we're already moving through the time of the class. So let me go back to the Zoom here. Let me open up first off the files here that I wanted to show you. So we go here. No, that's the wrong one. We go to here to this file. Here we go here, and let me see here. So what else is going on here? Um, Here's the Bulgaria report just to show you how the European Union functions. So I go stop share, make sure you see what I'm seeing. So I got to go share screen, go here, and you can see the share screen to show you what's going on in Bulgaria. Bulgaria has agreed to stop any contracts allowing Russia to supply natural gas to European Union countries by the end of 2027. So again, this was decided a few days ago. It says here that currently Budapest, Hungary, and Bratislava, Slovakia still on average get 70% of their natural gas from Moscow. And they have long resisted European Union efforts to phase out Russian energy imports, claiming doing so would hike prices given they have limited alternative supply. So Bulgaria has announced they're not going to allow Russian gas to transit through pipelines on Bulgarian territory. And these two countries, it says here, Hungary and Slovakia, have no power to override the EU's bill, given it only requires a qualified majority of countries to approve it, unlike sanctions. Hungary's foreign ministry and Slovakia's economists didn't respond to requests for comment by Politico. So what's this tell you? This tells you this was decided by the ordinary legislative procedure, right? Because it's decided by qualified majority of countries in the European Union to adopt this. So it qualified majority vote of the Council of the European Union, right? It does not require unanimous agreement by all 27 member states. And so what I'm trying to highlight here is that as the European Union tries to construct in your mind and in my mind that the European Union is a real actor, that it's moving towards becoming, in effect, a United States of Europe, a federal system, not a confederal system, but a federal system like the United States of America, the United States of Europe. They want more and more and more of these policies to be adopted according to the ordinary legislative procedure or some version of it. In other words, according to qualified majority voting in the Council of the European Union, not unanimous agreement, but majority voting according to qualified majority voting. And they want more and more of this to happen. And that's why they call it the ordinary legislative procedure, right? It's supposed to be ordinary. It's supposed to be typical. It's supposed to be the way ideally everything functions in the European Union. Another phrase for it is the community method. The community method means not requiring that all 27 member states agree, not unanimous agreement, but the qualified majority voting, right? And that's the ideal, that everything, including on really important topics like maybe putting economic restrictions on access to Russian oil and gas, a country that's attacking Ukraine is now threatening and harassing Denmark and Estonia and Poland, that those kinds of policies that are not direct military security policies, but are still part of national security, right? We have to stop taking in Russian gas and oil in Europe. That's not only an economic issue, which is typical for ordinary legislative procedure, right? The single market typically is decided by ordinary legislative procedures in determining the policies of the single market, but it still overlaps with security issues, right? Where we're going to continue to buy oil and gas and give our money to Russia while Russia's invading Ukraine and Russia's threatening to use force against other countries. So, but it's not being decided according to unanimous consent. So, 33 years ago, when the Maastricht Treaty in 1992 was adopted, it had three pillars, right? And the three pillars were the European Community pillar, which is the economic single market pillar. And then the other pillar was justice and home affairs. And the third pillar was common foreign security policy. Those two pillars, justice and home affairs, in other words, internal policing and justice and police and justice issues, right? And common foreign security policy, in other words, potentially involving military force. Those two pillars were supposed to be decided by unanimous agreement among all 27 member states. But over those past 33 years, the European Union has been, the leadership of the European Union has been trying to push the rest of the European Union policymaking into the community method, or in other words, qualified majority voting among the member states. And so you can see, even now on issues, for example, of gas, buying oil and gas, even though Hungary and Slovakia, we insist that we want to buy our cheap, cheap, cheap Russian oil and gas for our economy. Still, the European Union is deciding these issues now by some version of qualified majority voting. And this is a really important issue, right? Because Russia funds its military by selling fossil fuels for the most part, by selling oil and gas and coal. That's how it pays for this invasion of Ukraine. It's been going on for 3.5 years. But you can see this decision that we're going to stop buying Russian oil and gas no later than 2028. That was decided over the objections of Hungary and Slovakia by qualified majority voting. So technically, it's an economic market issue, right? And of course, the European community and later the European Union was supposed to be about international trade and building the single economic market. But that spills over to security issues. And again, that makes sense from what I was talking about earlier, about how in the world, the incremental world of policymakers, you build upon what you have. And what the European Union has is the single market. That's been going on since 1952. Since the coal and steel community was founded in 1952. So if you're going to move into issues of security and internal borders and border control, like justice and home affairs, right? You're going to try to push justice and home affairs and foreign policy issues into the frameworks that were created for creating the single market and negotiating international economic agreements. Because that's what you can do. That's what you have. That's what you're used to. That's the incremental world of policymaking. Even in responding to crises like, oh my God, the Russians have launched a full-scale attack on Ukraine. How are we going to respond? Economic sanctions. Economic sanctions require unanimous. Okay, we understand that. But there are things that we can push more in the direction of qualified majority voting, like deciding, for example, that we don't want to buy Russian oil and gas anymore. We're not going to, and of course, over the objections of Slovakia and Hungary, now you could say Slovakia and Hungary can say, well, we're going to buy oil and gas anyway. They can't because they're surrounded by European Union member states and Ukraine. So Ukraine is not selling them, letting Russia sell oil and gas through pipelines going through Ukraine to Slovakia and Hungary. They're not allowing it. And now the Bulgarians are saying, we're not going to allow it either. So that's a little bit different from what we were talking about earlier, how through the community method of some kind of qualified majority voting, for example, back 10 years ago, when the European Union decided that the other countries of the European Union have to help Greece because Greece is being overwhelmed with these migrants claiming asylum coming into Greece from Turkey and other countries, piling into Greece and also into other countries and coming into Greece and saying, I claim asylum, persecuted for my religious or political beliefs. And tens and hundreds of thousands of people are coming in to Europe 10 years ago. And the European Union leadership, including the Prime Minister of Germany at the time, Angela Merkel, said, we've got to take the pressure off these countries on the border with Turkey or close to Turkey, including Hungary or Bulgaria or Greece, of course. We've got to take some of these people because it's going to destabilize the Balkan countries. It's going to destabilize Greece politics. The neo-Nazi party in Greece, Golden Dawn, might come into power. Well, we don't know, but we've got to take some of these refugees, and so uh, Germany accepted 1 million of them 10 years ago. 1 million people from Syria, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, other countries that were coming in, and from other countries as well. But they also agreed, the European Union decided also that all the other member states of the European Union have to help by taking some of the immigrants, the refugees coming into Italy and Greece and elsewhere. And that was decided by qualified majority voting. And Hungary and Poland said, no, I know we're supposed to follow the community method, and this was decided by the qualified majority voting, but no, I'm not taking any immigrants from these African and Asian countries. No. And Hungary still hasn't, as I told you in a previous class. And Hungary could do that because Hungary has to agree. I mean, you can't stop. I mean, Hungary can stop anybody coming in if it doesn't want to. And the European Union, for example, I showed that Next Generation European Union program fund. Hungary still hasn't gotten any money from that because Hungary doesn't follow, quote, the rule of law. You agreed, Hungary, you signed the European Union treaties, you agreed this is how we're going to do things, and you refuse to implement what the European Union treaties require you to implement, so you're violating the rule of law. And the European Commission has not given Hungary any of that next generation European Union money. And I think it's up to $20 billion that Hungary is due, and they haven't gotten it, including from this next generation European Union funding that was decided 4 years ago. They haven't gotten any of it because they refuse to take any of these immigrants in. Right? But in the case of oil and gas, Hungary is surrounded by countries that are following the European Union requirements, and including Ukraine, which wants to join the European Union and has stopped allowing Russia to transmit oil and gas across its territory. Russia used to pay Ukraine for that oil and gas transit. They used to pay Ukraine to allow that gas from Russia to go through the pipelines over Ukraine into Hungary and Slovakia. And the Ukrainians said, we don't want the money. We're not going to take that. We can't do that anymore, right? So the point is that the European Union is the effort of these people trying to construct the European Union in your and my brains. To do that construction also involves moving more and more and more of what is really security policy and internal and foreign security policy to the ordinary legislative procedures, qualified majority voting, because I'm kind of hesitant to call it ordinary legislative procedures because there's many ways the European Union can decide to do things, right? That are in qualified majority voting in the Council of the European Union, the Council of Ministers, but they don't involve the Parliament directly, the European Parliament. There are some areas where they do that. I mean, a book that I used 20 years ago when I was teaching on this in Bulgaria, a famous book in European studies, highlighted that one author, her name was Harry Wallace, I think is a woman, I can't remember her first name. She counted 18 different ways that the European Union has decision-making procedures, like 18 different ways that the European Union has of deciding things. So let's just say qualified majority voting, that's the community method. We don't have to all agree. All 27 member states do not have to all agree, but we agree to follow the rules, the decisions that are made by qualified majority voting among the member states. Whether it be, the rule I showed you in the last class about it has to be 55% of the 27 member states representing 65% of the total population of the European Union. That's the qualified majority voting in ordinary legislative procedure. But they have other ways of qualified majority voting for other issues, on other topics, on other questions, but it's all part of the community method, right? Because we're supposed to be a European community. And that means us good Europeans, even if I'm in the minority and I lose in a vote, I agree that it's my European community obligation to implement the policy that was adopted by qualified majority voting, even though I'm in the minority and lost. You understand? So What else do I want to highlight here? We go back to again, just showing you from the perspective of Bulgaria because I work on Bulgaria. I'm always following Bulgaria. Do I have something here to highlight here? Why did I highlight this? See, can you see this? No, you can't see it. Okay, so I have to make sure I always do that. So maybe I don't need to. Yeah. Um, Let me open up a different one then. So we go here to. I think I already. Just a second. I'm trying to find something I haven't opened up already. So we go here. Um, another aspect of the European Union is, for example, stop share, and then we go screen share, and you can see this here, and you go here, and you can see. I remember I was commenting about how so many people have left Bulgaria. I mean, Bulgaria at one time, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, it had a population of over 9 million, and Bulgaria's population is now 6.5 million. Um, and those people moved abroad, right? Bulgarians went to Austria, went to Germany, went to all sorts of European Union member state countries. Also, they went to United States, Australia, Canada, just to show you how dependent the Bulgarians are on the free movement of labor for as part of the European Union to allow Bulgarians to go to Belgium or France or Germany or wherever to work and make money and send that money home. So it says here in this Bulgarian news report that Bulgarians abroad send over 100 million euros home monthly, right? And this isn't just from the European Union. This is also from the United States and Australia. But just to show you how dependent these former communist countries are on people sending money, leaving their country, using the right of free movement of goods, services, capital, and labor, right? The four freedoms, labor, to go abroad and not only promote their own social mobility, but also because their families back home in Bulgaria or Poland or Romania are depending upon these their family members to send some money home, so these people can live, so their families can live better, right? Yeah, it says here. Yeah, it says. Yeah, just to highlight. Um, since this just since the start of 2025, Bulgarians abroad have remitted a total of 864 million euros. So this little country, um, and that happens, the same way last year. And just to show you, I mean, this is really important part of all of these economies. It's. I think I told you, by some estimates, that at least 15% of the Bulgarian population left, and that's true for most of these former communist countries, all of the communist countries. Maybe not Slovenia. I mean, Slovenia of the former Yugoslavia might be different, but Bulgarians, Romanians, Poles, they have gone in, and so it says the majority of these remittances for Bulgarians originate from three countries: Bulgarians in the United States, Germany, and the United Kingdom. All right, and it says combined, they accounted for over half of all the transfers received by Bulgaria by June 2025. And other sources include Czech Republic, smaller but still notable sums come from Belgium, Greece, Austria, and of course, immigrants in Canada and Italy and so on. Just to show you again how important this single market is also for free movement of labor. And of course, now the Bulgarian government is trying to convince some of these people to come back home because of the demographic crisis, if only because of the demographic crisis. So Bulgaria is like South Korea, right? They've been disappearing basically. If these trends continue, I don't know if Bulgaria will still be around by the end of the century. So, and of course, South Korea is the same way. South Koreans aren't having babies, right? So again, but again, this is an illustration of the importance of the single market. And so what else do I want to highlight here? So we go here to what's this? I think I already showed you that. Sorry, wrong one. Go back here to um, and of course, this is really controversial in a lot of ways because there's elements of racism of course, in Europe as well, obviously, towards immigrants coming in from Africa and Asia. And, Nigel Farage, when he was pushing for Britain to leave the European Union, he really played with that. So, of course, this is a notorious, let me go back to if I can find it here, is that it? Here it go here. So, yeah, this is a notorious poster of Nigel Farage. This is, of course, from 2016. And so let me show you here. So we stop share, go back to this here, and you can see this BBC report from British Broadcasting Corporation report from, this is from 6 years ago, so 2019, remembering Nigel Farage. There you can see him. And this was one of his uh, propaganda posters during the Brexit campaign in the European Union, um, that was really effective in getting British people to vote in favor of leaving the European Union, because he convinced them that because the United Kingdom is in the European Union, it's making it easier for these Asians and Africans to ultimately get into the United Kingdom. And that's supposedly where they really want to go, because the economy is strongest in Great Britain. And of course, more people speak English around the world than speak German. So, if you're an immigrant from Iraq or Afghanistan, you're more likely to speak English if you know a foreign language than if you than speaking German, right? So you can see breaking point, the European Union's Phyllis. And if you look closely at this image, which I think was an image taken from Slovenia. So these are people streaming into the Balkans, close to Turkey, trying to get, they want to get, you're not going to look for a job in Slovenia, but you probably want to find a job in Germany or Britain, of course, Britain, or also in other Schengen area countries, which include, for example, Norway. Norway's not in the European Union, but it's in the Schengen area, named after the town of Schengen, where this policy was decided, that we would remove border restrictions between the countries in the Schengen area, that Bulgaria joined in March 2024 finally. But this is a picture from Slovenia. Look, if you look at these pictures, right, you don't see any white people. They're people that look like they're from the Middle East. Here's somebody, I don't know, maybe looks kind of Asian, maybe from Central Asia, maybe from China, but none of these people look white. So you could say, see, appealing to racism. We don't mind, so much if Italians or Slovenians or Polish people come in, but look at all these dark people coming into Britain, or threatening to come into Britain. And this was a really effective campaign poster that he used to support Britain voting to leave the European Union. And of course, Britain has never been in the Schengen area. When it was in the European Union, Britain, the United Kingdom, was never in the Schengen area. You always had to show your passport in order to get into Britain, and you had to get permission to come into Britain. But of course, he was claiming that just the mere fact that Britain is in the European Union, sooner or later, these people, once they get into Germany or France, they're going to find a way to get to Britain. But it's not just these people coming in from Asia and Africa. There's also more code words, so to speak, regarding other peoples coming in from, let me see, I'll find you here, the gypsies. So let me see, stop share. Again, and I should tell you, of course, that you can call these people gypsies, although typically the more appropriate phrase to call them are the Roma. So beginning about 50 years ago, you're not supposed to use the term gypsy to refer to these people. This is the biggest racial minority in Europe, the gypsies, the Roma. And I think a lot of the hostility you would hear from Nigel Farage about Bulgaria or Romania joining the European Union, which they did in 2007, was when people talk about Bulgarians, they're not talking so much just about white Bulgarians. They're talking about the 10% of the population in Bulgaria, or the 10% of the population in Romania that are Roma. And the Roma or gypsies are generally a target of segregation and hostility and contempt throughout Europe, including Western Europe, not only in Bulgaria and in Romania, but in Italy, Belgians, you tell me, what you think. French, you tell me. And of course, the European Union has been trying to find ways to help integrate the gypsies, the Roma, in Bulgaria, in Romania, partly because they want to keep them there. So you can see Deputy Prime Minister Atanas Zafirov, who also chairs the National Council for Cooperation on Ethnic and Integration Issues, will be among the keynote speakers at the 18th meeting of the European Platform for Roma Inclusion, to be held in Brussels on October 2nd. So that was yesterday. The event will address the topics, insights, and lessons after 5 years of implementing the EU Roma Strategic Framework, progress made, and remaining challenges, the government press service said Wednesday. So um, there's a lot of racist hostility towards Bulgarian Romania. But people like Nigel Farage, when he would complain about Romanians and Bulgarians, he wouldn't come out and say he didn't like the gypsies. He would just say, we don't like the Bulgarians. But I think there was a lot of reporting saying the issue was these gypsies. The sense is that these Roma are going to come to United Kingdom, or they're going to come to Germany or France, and they're going to apply for social assistance. They don't want to work. The stereotype of them is that they're lazy, they're backward, they don't want to work, and then they're going to come to France, or they're going to come to Britain, or they're going to come to Germany and benefit from the social welfare programs that have been set up in France, set up in Germany, set up in the United Kingdom, and get benefits using their right to move to those countries as part of the single market, to then come to those countries and then be parasites who are going to apply for welfare benefits and not work and be a burden on the government. And you see reporting on that all the time on far right social media about hostility to the European Union. That by being in the European Union, we're making it easier for these despised groups like the Roma to come in and basically move to Germany and apply for welfare benefits and become parasites, not work. So and so if you go to Bulgaria, you'll see those people. You'll see Bulgarian gypsies, and they live and they live and are targeted in Bulgaria as a source of hostility. I mean, they tend to be viewed stereotyped as a backward minority, stereotyped with contempt. So, if a Bulgarian gypsy commits a terrible crime or engages in some kind of activity causes people to die, like a car wreck. There was a report about some but he wrecked his car and killed a few people in Sofia by speeding too fast in Bulgaria. And the media reporting, because I follow the media reporting every day, highlighted, oh, by the way, he was Roma. It was in the headline. Roma kills 3 people with this car. Roma, this person who had had lots of traffic accidents, had been cited for bad driving many times, and finally he killed some people, and it was highlighted in the news report. A Roma killed these people, right? So if you go to, I mean, some of you probably already know, if you're Belgian or French, you probably know about the Gypsy Roma quarters where these people live, and they don't live well, obviously, right? But I mean, I've seen when I was in Bulgaria a few years ago. I mean, I saw some pretty frightening things. I mean, they were back then in Bulgaria, they're overwhelmingly illiterate. Bulgarian gypsies are overwhelmingly they cannot read and write. They drop out of school. The schools for mentally disabled children, they're overwhelmingly gypsy children, Roma children in those schools for mentally handicapped children. Like 80-90% of the children there are gypsy children. Um, I always remember walking in the area around my university, right, and seeing a gypsy woman, and she was sniffing. It looked like glue or gasoline out of a plastic bag to get a high from the fumes of the gasoline. And then I remember her passing it on to her child like this. It's like I was stunned. Wow, how illiterate, how ignorant. You know, she'd take a whiff and she handed the bag to her children, one of her children, so he could whiff it. Anyway, so just to highlight how this process works in action. So we need to go to our debate because we have a debate, of course, and I'm the debater, and of course I have to keep reminding myself that I don't have to cover everything in this class, but I also want to keep you enthusiastic by highlighting what's going on today in dealing with European integration and European Union institutions, what you're reading about, and how they're evolving and changing before our very eyes in response to this ongoing crisis in the crises in the European Union. So again, let me go to the institutions, and we go here to institutions. And so if I go here to the notes, and you can see, and so if I go search, let's see if I can do this without shutting down everything by accident. So find ECB. Yeah, European, and then these. Okay. The European Central Bank, established in 1998 on the eve of the launch of the final stage of economic and monetary union in January 1999, it maintains monetary stability, sets interest rates, and ensures in managing the euro. I mean, that's an understatement. And again, its first big challenge was in 10 years after it came into being, or when the financial crisis began around the world, right? A governing council directs it. But again, it became really dominant and powerful 10 years, 15 years ago. And it sits, again, where is the headquarters of the European Central Bank? It's in Frankfurt, Germany. Again, because Germany is the known foundation of the European community and the European financial system. And of course, the German central bank, the Bundesbank, like the Bundestag and the Bundesrat and the Bundeskanzler, the Bundesbank is headquartered in Frankfurt. And right across the street from the Bundesbank is the headquarters of the European Central Bank. And that's not a coincidence, right? Um, and it is a young institution, but it's become very powerful. And in 2014, it includes supervision of banks. So, it's supposed to intervene in Italian banks or Bulgarian banks or French banks or Dutch banks that are maybe in danger of going bankrupt. It's supposed to intervene and monitor them, although, of course, it's slower than in the United States with the Federal Reserve Bank monitoring American banks because we're dealing with member states. So, uh, Dutch politicians get very nervous when the European Central Bank proposes that a foreign bank in Belgium or in France take over a weak Dutch bank. I mean, it happens, but it's slow, right? Um, and of course, you can see about the European Central Bank what it's supposed to do. And it says, yes, to put it moderately, since the sovereign debt crisis that began in 2909, the European economic financial aspects of the European Monetary Union have developed considerably. The Commission and the Council have worked together closely. And you can see during the sovereign debt crisis, they work closely with the International Monetary Fund, which is basically Washington. So now, again, this is all being encouraged and supported by Washington. And you can see here that the European Central Bank, under Mario Draghi as the president, made some major developments to basically ensure that and with the agreement of the member states, that nobody, once you join the Eurozone, as Bulgaria will in 4 months, or as Croatia did 8 years ago, or as other countries did 9 years ago, I think. Yeah. No, 6 years ago in 2018. Croatia joined the Eurozone in 2018, I think. Once you're in, you're never going to leave. You're not going to default. We will not let you default. We didn't let Greece default. We came up with 300 billion euros to Greece to keep it from defaulting. So once you're in, you're in. And okay, so we need to go then to our debate. And so our debaters, let me make sure I don't push the wrong buttons here. And so I think, is it Luis? Luis, can you please turn on your camera? I think it's Luis, right? Let me see here. Who's debating? Yes, Luis. Where's Luis? Luis? Is
Okay,
Luis
I'm
is
here.
Oh, okay, okay. Hooray!
Hello.
Let's clap for Luis. Yay! I mean, because you're the first person to turn on their camera. So I thought, is anybody really there? I mean, am I the only one here? Am I talking to anybody? But I am talking to Luis. So, and of course, we'll have a vote on the debate afterwards. So it's the same format as in class. And so, this is being recorded. So by the way, I will post the link to the recording so everybody can go watch it again if they want to. And again, if you want to get extra credit points by asking extra credit question, you can do that as well. But of course, you're going to have to, speak on the microphone, turn on your microphones to do that, and maybe your cameras as well, so that we can all see you. And so I'll write down your names if you ask an extra credit question, so I don't forget to write down your name. I don't forget to give you those points. So we go back here then to the question, and you are pro, Luis. So again, if you, what I can do is I can share with you participants. Let me see. I'll go to share. Do you have something to show us? Your PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is make multiple participants can share simultaneously. So what you have to do is you have to first open up your PowerPoint presentation. Maybe you already know this, right? You open up your PowerPoint presentation. Once you open it, then immediately go um, um, to the share screen, the little green button at the bottom says share, and click on your PowerPoint presentation when you want to share your PowerPoint presentation for everybody to see. So I've made multiple participants can share simultaneously. So you should be able now, after you open up your PowerPoint or your PDF or your Word file, whatever, open it up, make sure it's open, and then share. Go back to the green button, pressing the green button, and you should be able to see what you have to click on in order to open up your file, to share your file with the rest of us. So you speak first. So I'll let you start when you are ready.
Yeah, I try to share my PowerPoint. Um, no. Um, ouais, j'ai vu. Sorry, I don't understand.
Open up your PowerPoint. Is it open?
Yes, yes, it's
And
open.
go back to Zoom, and then you see the little green button at the bottom, green square that says share. Okay, yeah. Okay, wait a second. So, yeah, okay, yeah, there it is. I see it. Now I don't. Go back to it. Okay. And you can,
Uh, uh,
and then
c'est
click
bon?
on the show. Okay, you can start.
Okay. So, I think NATO runs the European Union. You are wrong. I will show you why NATO doesn't control the European Union in the Ukraine war. In this case, the best value is decision making, sovereignty. Sorry. The best quote that represents my topic is the sovereignty of oneself over oneself is called liberty. But what is NATO? NATO is a military and political alliance between 32 countries. There are two different perspectives. At first, its political perspective is promote democratic value. and member cannot consult and cooperate on defense and security issue to resolve problems, build trust, and prevent conflict. In a military perspective, it resolves peaceful disputes and it possesses the military capability and necessary to undertake a crisis management operation. And what is European Union? It's a political and economic union between 28 member countries. The principle and value are freedom, democracy, the rule of law, and desire for peace and stability. NATO's objective is to guarantee the freedom and security of its member or not. But, for example, Ukraine are not member of NATO and European Union. However, both organizations support Ukraine with sanctions against Ukraine and humanitarian, economic, and military aid. But what does NATO? In military aid, establish a command that coordinates the provision of military equipment and training for Ukraine. It's called Security Assistance and Training for Ukraine. They apply weapons, ammunition, military equipment, drone, and aircraft. NATO defends the territory of all countries, whether or not a NATO member. For example, a few years ago, Russian drone crossed the Polish border. NATO announced that it would a sanction against Russia in the event of intrusion. And what is European Union does? It's economic and political head. The European Union continue its political, humanitarian, military, and financial support for the Ukraine economy and society. One of European Commission, it negotiate international agreement. For example, in 2022, the European Commission proposed 1.2 million euro to head Ukraine for the war damage. The European Council condemned Russia for the violating of United Nations Charter and territory integrity. And another example is in 2023, Eurojust created justicial database in store evidence from various international conflicts. Europol identify and combat criminal traits in order to protect country. And foreign minister imposed the sanction on Russia. The European Union also fight for the respect of human rights. And all these examples clearly show NATO and European Union have a different perspective about Ukraine war, and they didn't have the same objective. Okay. It's finished for me.
Okay,
For my
I
first
see I was
part.
supposed to go first, and I kind of should have done that. But of course, you've already read my comments on your paragraphs, and it seems to be pretty kind of straightforward. It basically the European Union is directed by by NATO. So I'll make my presentation again since you already read my comments. But it'd be interesting to hear what Khan has to say on this. I mean, in terms of my comments that I sent back to you about how I don't see. You can always find individual issues. Like for example, what I remember when the International Criminal Court was came into power, came into being with the Rome Statute that was signed in Rome as an international treaty creating the International Criminal Court. The United States didn't sign it. Bill Clinton was president at the time. He didn't sign it, and wanted and was nervous, at least among different groups in the United States, was nervous that the United States troops would be subject or threatened with punishment by the other countries that did sign the Rome Statute Treaty to create the National Criminal Court because being charged potentially with charges of war crimes. For example, if the United States was involved in a crisis and it sent its military that they might be charged with a resentful adversary of the United States might use the International Criminal Court as a weapon, as a political weapon to humiliate and try to arrest American soldiers on their territory because the American soldiers supposedly are charged or American officials were charged with war crimes, maybe there or somewhere else. Now, I know it sounds kind of absurd, but there was actually discussion about this, and of course, the U.S. government even passed legislation called well, I can't remember the name of the legislation, but passed legislation threatening to invade, attack any country that would try to arrest American soldiers, and also invade and threaten Brussels. Because of course the headquarters of the national, not Brussels, the Netherlands, sorry, the International Criminal Court's headquartered in The Hague in the Netherlands. And it all sounds very performative, very domestic policy oriented in terms of the politics of this in the United States. But but nevertheless, the United States was pressuring countries to make statements, not to be subject to American soldiers to the International Criminal Court proceedings. And there was resistance, right? I don't think there was a lot of resistance from Americans' allies to American pressure to weaken or undermine the National Criminal Court. So my point is, you can find individual cases where America's allies in Europe and elsewhere, like in South Korea and Japan, for example, they don't follow America's wishes. But overall, when you look at how the way NATO is, European Union members who are also in NATO, how they're acting, for example, regarding Israel. I mean, we have this, according to the National Court of Justice and other bodies, many bodies, non-governmental organizations, other observers, various UN bodies. I mean, there was another report came out from another UN body recently. This is genocide going on in Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territories more broadly by Israel. I mean, and that's the king of crimes. It's the most horrible crime in civilization is genocide. And here Israel has been, again and again and again, it's in the process of committing genocide against the Palestinians, at least in Gaza. And what is the European Union doing about that? Well, they make statements. Ireland has been very active, but Ireland's not in NATO. Ireland's in the European Union, but it's not in NATO. Spain, I think, may have moved to freeze arms sales to Israel. Well done, Spain. You're not going to sell them weapons, some weapons. Well done. I don't know how many weapons Spain sends. I haven't looked into it. I haven't studied it. But I mean, I don't think about Spain being a major arms provider for Israel. I think about the United States. And second, after the United States, in terms of arms supplies to Israel, is Germany. And Germany's not stopping its arms transfers to Israel. I mean, they're not even, the European Union is even talking about, well, they're talking about, well, Israel, unless you stop these genocidal policies, we're going to, we're going to maybe suspend or freeze our negotiations with you regarding a free trade agreement. Ha ha! We're going to stop negotiating a free trade agreement with you. Ha ha! I mean, that's it. They don't punish them, put sanctions on Israel. They put economic sanctions on Israel. They were putting sanctions on Russia, right? They don't put sanctions on Israel. The way they put sanctions on other countries in the past and the present for what they're doing. The way they put sanctions on Serbia. Why? And it seems to me because they don't want to make a United States. They don't have give the United States another reason, particularly under the Trump administration, to view Europe as a problem. That the European Union is a problem because of the U.S. commitment to Israel, because of mainly due to the power of the Israel lobby. So I mean, if you're going to try to prove to me that the European and the audience that the European Union is truly autonomous from NATO, you got to give me some real substantive differences beyond, for example, disputes over whether or not to sign and ratify the Rome Statute. I mean, that happened so long you don't even know about it. I mean, can you tell me one concrete example where the European Union has stood up to the United States? I mean, for example, even this most recent case regarding tariffs. Donald Trump has put 15% tariffs on European Union imports in the United States, exports from the European Union to the United States, and the European Union didn't put any tariffs on the United States in response to American exports to the European Union. None. So I just don't see. And you can say, well, why is this? Well, it's important for a lot of reasons because part of the European Union justification for itself is that it's supposed to be a truly global humanitarian focused entity that's working for the betterment of all humankind, for the rule of law and international relations overall, not just in Europe, but it really supports the United Nations. But uh, I just don't see evidence that they are autonomous from the United States. I mean, even now, what they've gotten, and they pleaded, and they go out of their way to try to persuade Trump to just kiss up to Trump, right? That please just don't be an obstacle to us. We need weapons for Ukraine. You Americans don't want to support Ukraine. Fine. We will buy weapons from you. We will give you Americans billions of euros to buy weapons to give to Ukraine. Just please don't oppose our aid to Ukraine. Don't oppose us as we try to support Ukraine. Please, America. Where's the evidence that the European Union is standing in the United States? Now, maybe there might be some desire to do that among the European Union member states. I mean, the French for years have been saying, we really should develop strategic autonomy, and that's a goal perhaps, but the political reality of doing that, because you need the other 26 member states to support you, right, in doing that. And if you're France, you can't do it on your own. You can't even do it with Germany. And Germany doesn't want to even support you in separating from the United States, right? I mean, the Germans have always been, until recently at least, the less enthusiastic or more skeptical of French efforts for many years to develop, a capacity to appear to be autonomous from NATO. Now they might not have any choice because Trump is not interested in hostile relations with Russia over Ukraine. He wants to hand this off to the Europeans. But elsewhere, for example, in dealing with Iran, for example, the Europeans are putting more sanctions on Iran in accordance with the United States. How long those sanctions will last? They might not last very long, but they don't want to. They're not willing to confront the United States. So what ends up happening is they end up, if they're not actively supporting the United States, they're at least passively supporting the United States. They don't change their policies. They don't put economic sanctions on Israel. They don't. I just don't see the evidence. Okay, so we have now your response, Louise. Please respond and rebut me and conclude.
Okay, I'm agree with you because United States.
You want to share your screen again or not? Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's okay with my PowerPoint?
I see you, but that's okay.
Okay, I'll try again. Ah, okay, I understand. Okay. I agree with you because I think that United States possess a large army and influence the decision of whole military for Israel of Ukraine. But I think that European Union's influence um, also because the European Union is a legal authority and it take its decision autonomously through its own institution because whole institution of the European Union has diriged by a president like Ursula von der Leyen or Antonio Costa, and it's very different between NATO and European Union because, for example, the role of the Security Council of the NATO is to maintain peace and they supply with the ammunition of military equipment, but the European Union had Ukraine with a sanction against Russia and with the I'm sorry. Okay. The European Union is a regional, political, and economic, but Ukraine are not member, but NATO help um, the Ukraine. NATO it's a global organization who aim to maintain peace and coordinate humanitarian aid. They have a very different role between European Union and NATO, and each one take care of different aspects in the Ukraine war. And I think that both organizations are complementary, but for me, NATO does not dirige, does not control European Union.
Okay. I mean, anybody have an extra credit question to ask to Luis Demaris? Anybody have an extra credit question? Please unmute yourself because you've all muted yourselves. So you have to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. So you have a minute or two. Are you ready to ask your question? Well, if not, then I will just conclude and say, okay, I can see your point about how the European Union integration process requires European initiative to make that happen. Okay, I mean, but again, I've seen like during crises, I mean, during the Greek sovereign debt crisis 15 years ago, the IMF in Washington, it's headquartered in Washington, they were directly involved, and that means the U.S. Treasury Department and the Secretary of the Treasury was of the United States Secretary of the Treasury was directly deeply involved in that. Partly because there was the sense that basically if there was a default and Greece left the European Union, it was going to cause many problems, including a worldwide recession, because a lot of European banks would go bankrupt because they've invested in Greek bonds and Greek banks, and it was a threat to the whole world, not just to Greece and the European Union, an economic threat to the whole world. And but um, but when then I see, for example, if the debate question was about NATO, and I when I see what NATO for me means the United States, right? So NATO got involved in Afghanistan. They tried to resist. The European countries tried to resist going into Iraq But when the United States went in anyway, along with many European member states, remember France and Germany did not support and opposed U.S. efforts to invade Iraq in 2003. And yet all the other European Union member states agreed to help the Americans despite the opposition of Paris and Berlin. London, Rome, Madrid, all, I think everybody, maybe with one or two exceptions in the European Union, they helped the United States occupy Iraq after the United States and Britain invaded Iraq in 2003, 22 years ago. And then they took over Trump's training missions in Iraq to train the new Iraqi army. I just don't see. I mean, that whole episode 22 years ago highlighted just how fragile this European Union is. And of course, we got reminded how fragile when Britain left in 2020. So I just don't see any evidence that basically the European Union is going to directly confront the United States, and that means they're not going to oppose. And that means basically if the United States asks them to do something, they're not going to say no. But for example, they've been providing aid and assistance to the Palestinians, um, but I haven't seen that the Americans are there. I mean, I don't see the Europeans standing up to Israel as they try to provide humanitarian aid to the Palestinians, right? They've been airlifting, dropping things by plane on parachutes in, but they don't block the Israeli blockade of Gaza. They don't break the Israeli blockade of Gaza. So anyway, I'm going on here, and we only have a few minutes left. So what I would like you all now to do is I'm going to stop share and one participant share at a time, and that's me. Uh, Replace current share, and that's my share. So I go to share back to if I can, without shutting down the classroom. So I open up my voting section here. So we go here to vote, and we go to vote, and then it signed me out. So I have to sign back in, log in like this, and then we go to policymaking in the European Union. And again, make sure that you can see what I'm seeing here, and go to share here and share. And so please vote now on the questions. And I want to stop this closed caption thing since I can. And let's see, settings, whatever. So you can see here the votes. So please go ahead and vote if you haven't voted, and particularly vote on on opening statement, presentation style, rebuttal, conclusion, use of week's reading material, and also particularly on grade the debate and who won the debate. So please grade the debate and vote on who won the debate, and do that before class ends. So if we then stop the share here, and then if I could hide captions, yes, that's why I need to hide the captions, and then go back to share. And if I can do this in the minute remaining, I don't have the Gemini thing set up here. So let me see if I can do that without, again, shutting down everything by accident. So we go here to Gemini, like this. And yeah, just to show you here in terms of justice and home affairs, for example, to share here, this is what I want to share. And you can see, for example, how it highlights that in these searches I've been doing before class about how they're moving more and more towards ordinary legislative procedure in the various ways. So, for example, it's no longer called Justice and Home Affairs; it's called the area of Freedom, Security, and Justice, and it falls under the ordinary legislative procedure since the Treaty of Lisbon in 2009. And of course, they're trying to move more and more towards the ordinary legislative procedure. You can see the Justice and Home Affairs pillar is now called the area of Freedom, Security, and Justice. And they moved to, for example, they adopted the most recent policies in like, for example, the European Defense Industrial Reinforcement through Common Procurement Act, was adopted through the ordinary legislative procedure, again, to try to reindustrialize, remilitarize Europe and develop its industrial capacities for military equipment, right? That was adopted through the ordinary legislative procedure. It's not part of national security, but it's the economic side of national security. The European Media Freedom Act, again, was also adopted by ordinary legislative procedure to reinforce the medias of the member states against Russian hybrid warfare disinformation campaigns, right? Where co-ed means co-decision, but that means it was adopted ordinary legislative procedure. So again, Bulgaria is being monitored in terms of its implementing its obligations on the European Media Freedom Act, right? Again, not directly part of warfare with Russia, but part of counteracting Russian hybrid warfare by spreading lies and disinformation and bots through bots on the internet and spreading disinformation and propaganda. And again, adopted the ordinary legislative procedure. But highlighting, of course, that still common foreign security policy, according to Article 29 of the Treaty of the European Union, still require unanimous votes, right? By acting with unanimity, according to Article 207 of the Treaty on Functioning of the European Union. So again, that's where I have to stop there because we have to quit our class. But again, I'll post all of these Gemini findings just to show you how European Union acts incrementally to build upon what it already has to adapt it and expand it to new challenges and problems. So if that's all, any questions? If not, then that's it for now. Okay. Bye.